Hello everyone, I'm Eric of PowerPoint Rap Battles. You already probably know that I make my own battles. However, I also enjoy watching others, and I enjoy ranking things. So this is my top 10 Freshy Kanal rap battles of 2022. Freshy made some of the best battles of the year, and I want to show appreciation to some of those. So before we begin, I'll make a few things clear. The first being, I am not including anything from before or after 2022, and the Fairy Tale Cypher will not be ranked, but I'd probably have it at around number 5. It's also quite important to note that this is based on personal enjoyments and my personal view on elements of quality, so it's a very subjective list. You are bound to disagree, but that's part of the fun. And one other thing, I have little knowledge of a few series and franchises and such that will heavily influence rankings. Right off the bat, I'll tell you I've not seen Stranger Things, so you may notice 2 omissions as a result of that. Also, subscribe so you know when a new rap battle comes out, because one is going to be on the way very soon. Let's begin the actual ranking. Immediately beginning weird, number 10 is Morbius vs. Dracula. I'm sure few of you would put this in your top 10, but I'll explain why I did. The writing is not anything crazy. There's plenty of good wordplay and fun jabs at the Morbius movie itself, but I don't mind that. It makes it more accessible, and I like that a lot of people would be able to watch and understand the disses, and it doesn't take as much research to enjoy it. I like the battle as a result of that. The stuff about Dracula's legend is good. The idea that there's no real references to the Morbius movie and just the meme itself, I think that's pretty good. Because honestly, the movie is super boring and there's really nothing that is worth noting in that film. So I think it was smart to go off of the meme. And the idea that Edward Cullen is the 3rd rapper to go working with Dracula, and the fact that Edward is not the weirdest or memeiest character is kinda hilarious and shows where memes are going. But I like this one a lot. Not to mention the Dracula art is really fun, the beat's pretty decent, some of the flows are fantastic, all performances are great. My only real nitpick with the battle is I feel at times the Morbius art isn't the best, as in I don't think BMB, while a great artist, really services the non-monster parts of Morbius's art. But there are some great facial expressions that are put in there, so I can't complain too much. Overall, Morbius vs. Dracula is an underrated one, a very fun one, and what more can you ask for? Number 9 is Maleficent vs. Scarlet, which I think some also don't really enjoy this one, but I do. I don't know what to say. It's not one where there's really any outstanding elements, but pretty much everything about the battle is very good. Both performances are probably the highlights for me. I like both, especially Maleficent. The singing part is done very well. And following that, I can mention the fact that the beat work is great on this one. The percussion that goes in near the end of Maleficent's first verse is quite great. And the visuals are fantastic. The dragon looks pretty awesome in the 3rd verse there. And I will say in general, this one's just pleasant to look at because the use of color I thought was great. I like the black and white part for the Wanda-based verse, and then when it's full on Scarlet Witch, the more red color palette. It's a very nice one to look at in general. The disses are pretty strong. I like the references to Quicksilver. The family reunion line is probably my favorite one because it's set up really well. And there's a lot to enjoy in this one for sure. I guess I can see why one really wouldn't like it that much, but there's lots to love. Good flow, good disses, everything you want in a battle is done well. It's not a best of the best kind of thing, but it's pretty solid. Number 8 is Inosuke vs. Raven. I'm sure many would put this one a lot higher, so it's the opposite of Morbius vs. Dracula, but I do not. Let's talk about the best stuff first. So visually, this is among the best of the year. The art by Cyancoat is fantastic, some of the best that Cyancoat's ever done. And the other thing is the AMV for Raven, especially the part where it's the Teen Titans logo, but with Kanal spelled out, and it segues into the next line. That's the best to look at for sure. I enjoy looking at this one, and the beat is pretty good. Both performances are spot on. Natsuki's flow just does not let up in that first verse, and I really like the way it sounds. Isn't this one any higher? Well, for me, I feel like the writing is what holds it back. Perhaps I just did not understand what some stuff meant. I'll admit I'm not super into Doki Doki Literature Club, so I don't really know much about it. But it felt like a lot of Natsuki's lines were really basic and not as fun as the Morbius lines that weren't super extreme. So I just wasn't as into the disses or going, oh, every once in a while like I would at most battles. But it's still a great one overall. Production's excellent, even if certain things didn't quite hold or stick with me the way it did in a few others. Number 7 is King Julien vs. King Louie. This is honestly a huge jump from 8 to 7, because the top 7 here are phenomenal battles. This one I love everything about. The beat is awesome in this one. Both performances are fantastic. I honestly could not tell Snakebite was doing King Julien. It was that good. And then Chase Becca's King Louie was fantastic. The singing portion is excellent. The visuals are great. I think Luke is one of the best animators that Freshy has. And this one being fully animated in his style, I enjoy. The disses work really well in this one. And while some like to complain about meme lines that end up dated in Freshy battles, I think the boring ape one is still really funny today. But there's a lot of standout lines here that I thought were great. All the puns were quite strong. Like even King Julien, the smoking line, I thought that was pretty funny too, even though that's a minor one, but so much from this one sticks with me. And also it seemed like King Louie got way more mic time, but that's a pretty minor thing. So overall, this battle is excellent, and there's really not much I can complain about. It's one of the best of the year, an absolute blast, fun like Morbius, but a lot more to it. Number 6 is Bakugo vs. Inosuke. I don't know if that's how you pronounce those, I'm sorry. But I'll put it this way. I mentioned that I have not seen Stranger Things. I did not know who these two people were. I thought Bakugo was from Bakugan based on the name. I had never heard of either of these characters at all. So, you would expect I wouldn't like this one very much. However, even though I didn't catch on to a lot of the disses, I'm sure, every other aspect of this battle is just legendary. This one is, for lack of a better word, hype. It has such a high energy the whole way through, it makes it one of the most enjoyable battles for sure. The beat is super intense, but also has moments of levity that are just really awesome to listen to. The performances, I don't know if they're good impressions, are both incredibly high energy. They get really angry at several points, and I think it's awesome. The flows really build well, especially at Inosuke's kind of middle verse, where it's talking about Sentry, no sensei, you're self-centered, I'm self-made. That one actually goes off. And the visuals, even though a lot of it is AMV clips from the shows Demon Slayer and it was My Hero Academia, I'm pretty sure, it looks awesome. The clips chosen were excellent. Parts seem to actually be tailor-made for the visuals that are being said with the audio, and that's kind of impressive because they oftentimes weren't even talking about what's going on screen, but it seemed to fit so well. So it's great to watch while you're listening with the great disses and music. There were some disses I definitely caught on to because I did some research on these characters. I don't plan to watch their shows ever, and I think some of these disses are insanely harsh. I also love the color palette in general, the yellow for Bakugo and the blue for Inosuke. It's visually one of my favorite battles of the year. And there's so much to enjoy about this one. It definitely earned a top 10 spot. I'm sure many wouldn't put it this high, but it's a blast. And it's fun like others I mentioned before, but way more intense, so there's really nothing I can complain about. It's just that good. Number 5 is Frankenstein vs. Hulk. The Halloween special, I think this one's pretty awesome. I'll start by saying it's probably top 3 for many, and for me visually, in terms of the animated battles, it is number 1. Signco's animation really goes all in here. Every minor movement of the characters seems natural. The fact that as they talk, the jaw moves with them now. It's not just a mouth put over a drawing. I think that's very commendable and deserves a lot of credit. I'm sure that's been happening in a few other battles. I know some I mentioned had it, but I think it might be at its best here. The designs for all the characters, whether it be Victor, Banner, or especially Hulk and Frankenstein, looks great. I like She-Hulk appearing for one moment, and it looks great as well. The color in this one really pops as well. The black and white parts are eerie, and the parts that are the brighter greens and purples of it with Hulk, they look great. It's a very atmospheric battle. The beat sets the tone right away, and let's just kind of go through the battle. So starting with the first verse, which is delivered by Freshy himself. So Victor Frankenstein, who happens to be the greater mind, he does not rap very fast at first. He goes slow and then builds up into some faster stuff. But it never gets super quick or anything. There are parts that have some quick tongue, but it never feels like crazy fast raps happening. It keeps a bit spooky and eerie, and I like that. When we get to Hulk, in this case, Banner starting out, the fast part really starts. And I love that. It feels much more of a Banner kind of thing, and the beat gets way more intense as he's going faster and going harder on the disses. But then once we get to the reveal of Frankenstein's monster, the It's Alive is one of the best moments in any battle, honestly. It is one of the most insane third-party reveals. And it's not even third-party, but you get what I'm saying. Character reveal, it's excellent. And the Edward Norton line also happens to be quite awesome. Then once we get to Hulk, Hulk stays on one flow, slower, but it's still great. Performance is awesome. The Easter Island line is very funny. There's really no complaints with this battle. Great visuals, great performances, great sound, great flow, great writing. I see why it's a favorite of so many, and it is definitely among the best. Alright, we've talked about 6 animated battles. Let's move to live action. Number 4 is Robin Hood vs. Guy Fawkes. Number 1 for many, I'm sure. Many say it's the best of the year, and in terms of the scale and passion put in, I'm sure it is. It is a very big battle. There are several rappers, the horns at the beginning and end really add a lot. There are several visual changes and huge backgrounds made. I can definitely see this being possibly Freshy's favorite that he made. And I can see all the effort that went in. Let's talk about some of the best things besides the scale. All performances are good. The Merry Men have the right energy. Dan Bull as King James is pretty fun. Stupendium really brings a lot to the role as Guy Fawkes. And I think this is my favorite Guy Fawkes performance in any battle. And then Little Flex as Robin Hood delivers some great flow while keeping the character very consistent. Unlike his views, because the disses against Robin Hood as an outlaw and against Guy Fawkes as somewhat dishonoring the Lord are both strong. In general, the writing's great. Most of the fast flow you can understand, which is good because you want to be able to understand what's being said while the fast parts are delivered. So there's a good mix of the style and substance. At the same time, great disses are being thrown at both sides. The only thing I will say is that I don't love the execution idea because even though it's fun and in a YouTube video it's good, I kind of feel like, to an extent, it does not service a rap battle, and King James's part is just talking about how they're going to kill Guy Fawkes, and it's not even really part of a battle. So it seemed a little weird to me and somewhat broke up the flow. But I think it's still very good, and following that, the flow really stays on that for a bit, and it's very good. There's not a whole lot to complain about. Visuals are awesome the whole way through. I like the way the execution's done, even though I'm not super keen on it as I mentioned. I think the opening part with the illustrations cutting to live action was really clean and good. The forest looks great. All the costumes are strong. There's really nothing else to say wasn't perfect besides the one part I mentioned. It is a top tier battle, even though I enjoy 3 others a bit more. Number 3 is Frodo Baggins versus the Ancient Egyptians. This April Fool's battle, it's a weird one because it's not really one battle, but rather 4 mini battles. And fortunately, all of them are great. I'm gonna go through each one individually. So, Ramses, I love that one. The performance for Ramses has the arrogance, but is also kind of laid back and fun. And some of the beat work makes the lines sound really awesome, like the trample temple part. And then once Frodo goes in, Ramses gets completely owned. The flow on that one, the rhyme schemes are fantastic. And the part where he's going Frodo solo on the Bozo No Hope, I think that was excellent. Best part of that one, I would say. I also like the late on the track calling Gandalf, that was kind of funny. And then we get to King Tut in the weird triangle thing in the desert. The flow on this one is excellent. And a few lines are awesome, such as the denial line and the grabbing a date line. And Snakebite brings a high energy performance that seems like a King Tut kind of would be. Then Frodo comes in with personally my least favorite of his verses, but the flow is still excellent. And their exchange afterwards about selling the ring has some iconic moments, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now for Cleopatra, things get really good. Cleopatra has a few very solid disses against Frodo, and the flow absolutely goes in. This is one of the best parts for sure. Some of my favorite lines came from this one. I would say I think Cleopatra's line about the milk bath was really funny, and in general she had a lot of good stuff. But then Frodo brought the Sweet Home Alexandria line and just kind of completely destroyed her. And his final thing, even though his verse felt shorter because he had to talk about how he was the next person offering her a ring, it was funny. Then we get to Anubis. Anubis had the best verse of the Egyptians, I would say. It wasn't as crazy flow per se as Cleopatra's, but everything from the visuals to the best beat by far of the ones that was used, I would say. To, of course, some very strong disses, really going in not just on Frodo in general, but more his mission to get rid of the ring in this video. I thought that was a very clever way to go about it. And then Samwise brings in some of the funniest lines for sure. The visuals vary a lot in this one. I think some are weaker than others, but it's overall quite good to look at. The story tying it all together is quite funny, and Freeze as the narrator has some really good moments. So overall, this one's very comedy focused, but very good with most of that comedy. I like this one a lot, and it's definitely one of my favorites of the year. Number 2 is Edgar Wright versus Wes Anderson. Possibly the least flawed battle of the year. Both director styles are captured so well in this, and that is the main highlight. The editing is fantastic, the backgrounds are great. I will admit, they vary in quality a bit, but the best backgrounds are stunning. The costumes and performances, it feels like the directors very much. I'll admit it did feel like I was watching based on the thumbnail, Edgar Wright versus Little Flex, but that's not really anyone's fault. I think the fast flow is my favorite of any battle, possibly just ever, and all of the lines are great. Outside of the fast flow part, it stays on one consistent flow for the most part, but it allows us to really soak in some really well set up disses. Of course, there's a line about getting fired that is one that's too good to truly spoil, so I'm not going to really mention it here. And then I'll point out that the one where Edgar Wright says Wes must be drunk, but he looks too young to drink, so they reference that When's Your Birthday scene from Hot Fuzz. That's brilliant. I love that. There's a lot of just fantastic, memorable lines in this one. And oftentimes they're serviced by the visuals. For example, the Vanity Fair section for Edgar Wright is also super memorable. I thought that was hilarious, even though he called me out for liking Isle Dogs and whatever. The one thing I'll say is the closing line, I don't get it. So I like having a final line that really sticks with me, but that one I don't really know what it meant. If someone says in the comments, that'd be cool, but that's not at all Freshy's fault. This is one of the best battles. Visuals awesome, beat fun, flow great. This is awesome. It is definitely one of the best, and I did consider putting it at number 1. However, number 1 had to go to... Indeed, number 1 is Boris Johnson versus the Penguin. Why is it number 1? Honestly, the main reason is I remember the most from it by memory. I think I could do this one by heart, and there was a lot of elements that stuck with me as being some of the best. I'm going to kind of go through the battle and just talk about highlights instead of going into the specific elements, because there's a lot to cover. So first of all, the opening is fun. I like the whole banter thing as if they're in an actual debate, and right off the bat, we can clearly see that the vocal performances are awesome. Little Flex as Penguin is great, and then Dan Bull as Boris Johnson is funny, and I think it's done quite well. Then once Boris Johnson begins, I know we all talk about how Penguin destroyed in that fight and all, but some don't seem to talk about how Boris Johnson had some fantastic lines. His first verse, everything was great. The opening line saying he may as well just be the mayor of Birmingham is a fun way to kind of establish the power levels that Johnson sees them at. Conservative, but I'm putting the women through labor is one of the funniest lines ever. especially with the body acting being just flawless for that moment. The passport line is funny. DCEU is absolutely clever and just beyond comprehension in terms of how great. Honestly, I love that one so much. And then the COVID PSA thing is funny. And the Peppa Pig thing obviously doesn't carry a lot of weight, but it's a funny way to end the verse. Then we get to Penguin's first verse, and things really turn up a notch. The beat gets way darker and more intense. The flow and rhyme schemes are awesome. Freshy gives one of the best body acting performances of the year as Penguin. And there are so many things that stick with me. The clip I showed at the beginning was a very strong one because it hyped up Penguin as this great, powerful villain, and then turned the table and called Boris Johnson the villain, even though he isn't trying to be, or at least is not supposed to be. The whole thing about how Boris Johnson didn't earn his spot in society while Penguin really did, and it kept going up until he shot his henchman guy, that was also awesome. So many lines stick with me from this one. There's a lot of great parts in it. The big bird bed hair line's also fairly funny. And the lighting sticks out in this one. And then of course one other line I have to mention from this verse. The resignation line is among the best wordplays, period. Right there, honestly above DCEU. So that's just the first half of the battle. Then Boris Johnson has this funny, faster flow with different instrumentation that I think is really good. And he's dressed like a rapper this time. And he gives possibly the funniest line in rap battle history. In Penguin bars are supposed to have jokes. A reference to a penguin chocolate bar type thing they have in the UK that has jokes on the rapper like Laffy Taffy. That is just beyond hilarious. Then the final Penguin verse, I'll admit, less sticks with me. But I really enjoyed the bus visual. The Iceberg Lounge is an awesome background. The camera work is some of the best I've ever seen in a Freshy battle. And the performance stays strong. The Arkham line is still great. And of course the sponsor of this battle is just fantastic. Okay, that last part was a joke. But overall, I adore this battle. Pretty much everything about it is great. I believe Little Flex wrote the whole thing or most of it, and I will say, this was just the year of Little Flex. He made one of the best battles in CMRB's Fazbear vs. Cartman, and also Kermit vs. Yellow Guy. So, Little Flex, if you're watching this, great job and keep at it for sure. Because you've made pretty much the best battles of this year, and yes, live action did dominate this top 4. Maybe live action is just what I like most in the battle. I don't really know, but honestly, that's gonna be the list. Thank you for watching, subscribe for more content, and comment down below your Freshy list for sure. I'll see you next time, hopefully, with a new battle.